Today is Thursday, December 4th, and the entire world is still trying to understand what happened just 48
We're
hours
losing.
ago. Because on Tuesday, December 2nd, Netflix released Sean Combs' The Reckoning, a four-part documentary produced by 50 Cent, and the moment it hit the platform, everything changed for Diddy in a way no courtroom, no lawsuit, no scandal ever managed to do. This wasn't just a documentary. This was an exposure, a demolition, a complete stripping away of every layer Diddy spent decades building around himself. People pressed play expecting a story. They got a revelation. And for Diddy, it was the beginning of the end. Right from episode 1, it became clear that this series wasn't holding anything back. The hidden video clips, the leaked phone calls, the time-stamped footage, the interviews from people who had never shown their faces publicly before, victims who spoke with shaking voices and eyes full of memories they had tried for years to forget. Viewers around the world sat frozen as they watched allegations turn into visuals, whispers turn into recordings, and rumors turn into undeniable evidence. Diddy's glamorous public image suddenly looked like a mask, and The Reckoning ripped that mask off in less than an hour. Before we go any deeper into this story, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell icon. That's how you'll never miss any breaking updates like this. Now, let's get back to the story, because what followed after the documentary released was unlike anything Hollywood has ever seen. Social media didn't just react, it exploded. Millions of comments, millions of views, millions of people trying to process what they just watched. Hashtags like hashtag Diddy Exposed, hashtag The Reckoning 50 Cent, and hashtag New Evidence trended globally. You could feel the disbelief through the screen. You could feel the anger boiling. You could feel the shift. The world realizing that this documentary might actually change something real. And inside legal circles, that shift was even stronger. Lawyers, analysts, former investigators, all of them breaking down scenes in slow motion, pointing out inconsistencies between Diddy's courtroom statements and the documentary footage. Some argued that Diddy's entire sentencing might need to be reevaluated. Others claimed the documentary exposed manipulative behavior never reviewed by the court. But the biggest shock came from the victims' interviews. Stories so emotional and detailed that Cassie's legal team immediately recognized their value as new evidence. For the first time ever, people who had been silent for years finally felt safe enough to speak. And their words didn't just go viral. They reopened a case. They changed a timeline. And they pushed Diddy toward the harshest judgment of his life. This wasn't just a documentary fallout. This was the spark that lit the fuse. And the explosion was only hours away. The moment the documentary hit global screens, the reaction online was instant and merciless. People weren't easing into it. They were binge-watching all four parts in one sitting, rewinding scenes, clipping moments, zooming into frames, and analyzing every expression, every pause, every whispered word. It didn't feel like people were watching a film. It felt like they were watching a confession, and the shock that followed was louder than anything Diddy had faced before. Within hours, every major social platform became a battlefield. TikTok flooded with breakdown videos, YouTube overflowed with reaction streams, Twitter, X became the center of outrage, with legal experts, journalists, celebrities, and everyday viewers all saying the same thing. How did he only get 50 months? Clips of hidden footage circulated so fast that Netflix servers reportedly saw one of their highest engagement spikes of the year. Some scenes left viewers speechless, like the leaked call recordings where Diddy's tone shifted from confident to desperate, or the victims' interviews where they finally told stories that had never been heard publicly. People weren't just upset, they were furious that these clips had existed in private while the court was given a watered-down version of the truth. Forums lit up with long threads connecting dots from old scandals. Fans paused the documentary, comparing it to previous statements Diddy had made, calling out contradictions in real time. Even celebrities who once stayed neutral began posting cryptic reactions. Some shocked, some disgusted, some saying they always knew something was wrong. And then came the biggest wave of victims whose names weren't even in the documentary started speaking up online. Comments like, "Finally, someone showed the world what we went through. People have no idea how much has been hidden." Everything they showed is just the beginning. These posts spread like wildfire. Cassie's legal team saw them too. Screenshots, reposts, stitched TikToks, and began gathering everything as potential evidence. The more the world talked, the more pressure built around the justice system. People demanded explanations. Analysts questioned the original sentence. Influencers created hour-long breakdowns of every scene in The Reckoning. But for Diddy, the worst part wasn't the public reaction. It was the silence inside Fort Dix. According to insiders, he barely spoke after the documentary dropped. He refused meals. He walked in circles in his cell. He kept asking guards if that footage was really shown. He knew the world was watching him burn, and there was no PR team left that could put out the fire. By the end of the first 24 hours, The Reckoning wasn't just trending, it was dominating global conversation. The court had no choice but to take notice. The judge had no choice but to take notice. Cassie's team had more than enough momentum to act. The internet had turned into a courtroom. And the pressure from millions of voices was about to force the real courtroom to reopen. Cassie's legal team had seen public outrage before, but never like this. This time it wasn't rumors, it wasn't speculation, and it wasn't anonymous posts on social media. It was a full-scale documentary released on one of the world's biggest platforms, backed by real footage, real voices, real timelines, and real victims finally speaking without fear. And the moment the team finished watching all 4 episodes, they knew instantly. This wasn't just noise. This was an opportunity. A door that had never been opened before was now kicked wide apart. Inside their office, the atmosphere was electric. Screens played different scenes from The Reckoning at the same time. Lawyers paused and rewound frames, analyzing every second. They scribbled notes, highlighted contradictions between Diddy's public statements and the new footage, and compared audio clips to old transcripts. Every new detail felt like another crack opening in the foundation of Diddy's original 50-month sentence. But it wasn't just what Netflix showed. It was who started speaking because of it. For the first time in years, victims who had never gone public began reaching out. Emails, voice notes, private messages. People who were terrified to come forward suddenly felt protected by the avalanche of public support. Some described moments of fear, others described painful memories, and a few shared details that lined up exactly with scenes shown in the documentary. And when Cassie listened to these new testimonies, she didn't cry, she didn't panic. She simply closed her eyes and breathed for the first time in years, because she knew this was the moment she'd been waiting for. Her legal team immediately organized everything into categories: new statements, documentary clips, leaked calls, interview segments, timeline inconsistencies, behavioral patterns, and previously unseen recordings. The pile of evidence grew larger every hour. One attorney held up a document and said, "This isn't just public outrage anymore. This is a reopening." And he was right. The pressure from the documentary wasn't just emotional, it was factual, time-stamped, visually backed. It showed patterns of control, threats, manipulation, and panic that had never been reviewed during the original sentencing. And when the lawyers compared some of the leaked call transcripts to what Diddy had said under oath, their expressions changed instantly. You could see it in their eyes. Shock, then realization, then resolve. That was the moment they decided. They were going back to the judge. Cassie didn't hesitate. She signed the paperwork without saying a word, because the documentary said everything for her. Her legal team drafted a formal emergency petition, stating that the documentary revealed substantial, previously unavailable evidence that fundamentally changed the nature of the case. They attached clips, time codes, transcripts, screenshots, statements, everything. And while the world argued online, Cassie's team sent their petition directly to Judge Arun Subramanian. The judge received it late evening, and when he began reading it, something shifted in his expression. This wasn't sensationalism. This wasn't speculation. This was real evidence laid out in a structured, factual way. Evidence he had never seen. Evidence that questioned whether the original sentence had been based on the full truth. Cassie's team had done more than react to a documentary. They had taken the shock of the world and turned it into legal ammunition. What they didn't know yet was how quickly that ammunition was about to explode in court. Judge Arun Subramanian didn't expect to be pulled back into the Diddy case this soon, and definitely not like this. When Cassie's emergency filing landed on his desk late Wednesday evening, he thought it might just be another reaction to a viral documentary. But the moment he opened the file, his expression changed. This wasn't public drama. This was a legal earthquake. The filing was thick, organized, detailed. Every page pointed to something the judge wasn't supposed to ignore. Every clip, every timestamp, every transcript from the reckoning told a different story than the one presented in the original sentencing hearing. And the biggest problem? The court had never seen any of it. Judge Subramanian leaned back in his chair, the glow of his computer screen reflecting off his glasses. He played one of the leaked calls from the documentary, the one where Diddy sounded frantic, whispering, trying to calm down the panic in his own voice. It didn't match the confident, controlled image he had shown the court before. It didn't match his previous statements. It didn't match the tone he used when claiming he had nothing to hide. The judge paused the audio and closed his eyes for a moment. This wasn't the kind of evidence you could brush aside. This wasn't something you could say the court already considered this. This was brand new and deeply concerning. Meanwhile, downstairs in the courthouse, prosecutors were already gathering. They had seen the documentary too, and just like the judge, they realized how damaging it was. One prosecutor slammed a folder onto the table and said, "This changes the entire picture. We need to revisit everything." Another added, "The public pressure alone makes this unavoidable. But the evidence makes it necessary." Cassie's legal request hit the perfect moment. The entire country was talking, the media was dissecting every frame, legal analysts were demanding action, and the documentary was already being treated like a federal exhibit by the public. The pressure was massive, but the judge wasn't reacting to public emotion. He was reacting to the truth he had just witnessed with his own eyes. And the truth was this: the original 50-month sentence didn't make sense anymore. As the night went on, Judge Subramanian reviewed the filing again, slowly, carefully, methodically. And by the time the courthouse clocks hit midnight, he had made a decision that even his staff didn't expect. He called in his senior clerk. "Prepare for an emergency hearing," he said, his voice low but firm. The clerk blinked. "Sir, at what time?" "Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Notify all parties. This cannot wait." Those words triggered a chain reaction through the building. Phones rang nonstop. Emails were sent at lightning speed. Security teams were alerted. Federal marshals were instructed to arrange Diddy's transport at dawn. Outside the courthouse, the media had already begun gathering, even though the public had no idea what was coming, but they sensed it. Something big was about to happen. Something massive. And inside Fort Dix prison, a guard approached Diddy's cell with a simple message. "You're being taken back to court tomorrow morning." Diddy reportedly froze mid-step. He didn't ask why. He didn't argue. He just stared at the wall in complete silence. Because deep down, he already knew exactly what this was about, and he knew it wouldn't end well. By the time the first light of Thursday, December 4th, touched the courthouse steps, the entire building was already vibrating with tension. Federal marshals stood guard in heavy formation, blocking every entrance and scanning every face that approached. Camera crews rushed to claim their spots, anchoring themselves to the ground like they were preparing for a natural disaster. Reporters whispered urgently into microphones, rehearsing lines for the moment they would break the next historic headline. Inside, the atmosphere felt even heavier. Court staff moved quickly, almost anxiously, carrying files and setting up equipment. Every person in the building knew this wasn't a routine hearing. This was something else, something that could change the course of the entire case, maybe even the entire industry. Judge Arun Subramanian was already in his chambers, robe on, hands folded, reviewing notes for what would become the most consequential decision of his career. Meanwhile, prosecutors arrived early and in silence. No jokes, no chatter, no confidence, just focus. They gathered around their table and quietly rehearsed the arguments they had polished overnight. They knew the Reckoning documentary didn't just expose disturbing details, it exposed a gap in the original sentencing that made the justice system look blind. Today wasn't about punishing Diddy. Today was about restoring the court's credibility. Cassie's legal team entered next, carrying evidence folders, printed transcripts, and files stuffed with screenshots and statements from viewers who had reached out after the documentary aired. Cassie followed close behind, her face steady and calm. She took her seat without saying a word, but the determination in her eyes said everything. She wasn't just here for justice. She was here for closure. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. Diddy's arrival. A black transport van pulled up to the back of the courthouse, shielded by armed marshals. Witnesses later said that Diddy stepped out slower than usual, his hands trembling slightly as he looked at the courthouse doors. Gone was the confident walk, the guarded arrogance, the sense of control he carried in past hearings. Today he moved like a man who already knew the outcome. Inside, as he was escorted to the defense table, people turned to watch him. Diddy didn't look at them. He kept his eyes locked on the floor, as if he could avoid the weight of the documentary that had shattered his public image just 48 hours ago. Mark Agnifilo sat beside him, shuffling papers. But it was obvious the lawyer-client dynamic had cracked. The leaked calls had damaged that trust, and they both knew the courtroom was no longer bending in their favor. When Judge Subramanian entered, the silence was instant, sharp, total, suffocating. He sat down slowly, scanning the room, absorbing the energy, the fear, the anticipation. He knew the world was watching, even if only a few people were physically present. And he also knew that the evidence from the reckoning had ignited a public firestorm he could no longer ignore. The judge began speaking, his tone low but commanding. He explained the urgency of the hearing. He referenced the documentary directly, acknowledging the new footage, the leaked calls, and the testimonies that had forced the court to revisit the sentence. He noted the overwhelming public response and the serious questions surrounding whether the original 50-month punishment accurately reflected the severity of Diddy's actions. Diddy swallowed hard. He felt the walls closing in. The judge's voice grew more serious. This court must determine whether the previous sentence was based on a complete and accurate understanding of the facts. And with that line, the real showdown began. The speeches, the evidence, the courtroom silence. Diddy knew. This wasn't the beginning of a hearing. This was the beginning of a verdict that could redefine his entire life. The judge gave a single nod, and the marshal dimmed the courtroom lights just enough for the giant monitor at the front to glow like a warning. A hush rolled through the room. You could feel hearts pounding, breaths tightening, hands gripping the arms of chairs. This wasn't a hearing anymore. It felt like a sentencing before the sentencing. Every eye locked onto the screen as the first frame of the reckoning appeared. And then, the nightmare began. The opening clip was a victim's interview. Raw, trembling, painfully honest. Her voice cracked as she described fear, manipulation, and moments that had haunted her for years. Her eyes glistened on the screen. Her voice echoed off the courtroom walls. And for a moment it felt like everyone was trapped inside her memory with her. Some people looked away. Some swallowed hard. Even a few reporters stopped typing. But Diddy? He sat stiff, motionless, clenching his jaw so tight it looked like he was trying to stop his own face from trembling. Then came the hidden footage, the kind that wasn't supposed to exist. Shaky clips recorded in dark rooms, whispered conversations caught on old devices, shadowy figures moving in hallways. It didn't show everything, but it showed enough. Enough to paint a picture that no legal argument could erase. Agnifilo leaned in toward Diddy, whispering something, but Diddy didn't respond. He just stared at his own reflection on the screen. Not the superstar, not the mogul, not the legend he wanted the world to see. For the first time, Diddy looked like a man facing the truth of his past and losing. And then the moment everyone expected, but nobody was prepared for, appeared on the screen. The leaked phone call. The call that had shaken the entire internet. The call that changed everything. Diddy's voice filled the courtroom speakers. Tense, anxious, cracking around the edges. Mark, they can't see this. If this gets out, I'm finished. You understand me? I'm finished. Gas filled the room. Even the judge's face tightened. Agnifilo's voice followed, tired, frustrated. Stop panicking. We don't know how much they have. Stay quiet. The clip ended, but the silence that followed was louder than the call itself. Because everyone understood what that audio meant, Diddy wasn't worried about lies being told about him. He was terrified of truths being revealed. The judge leaned forward, elbows on the desk, fingers steepled under his chin. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. His expression said everything. The prosecutors rose next, and their tone was sharper than it had been all morning. They pointed out contradictions between Diddy's past testimonies and the new footage. They highlighted moments where his behavior in the documentary suggested manipulation. They emphasized that the leaked call directly hinted at concealment, maybe even obstruction. Every sentence landed like another hammer on the defense's table. Agnifilo stood to respond, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. He tried to frame the documentary as edited for dramatization, lacking full context, not admissible as formal evidence. But even he could hear how weak it sounded. His own leaked conversation with Diddy had already dismantled half of his argument. Diddy's breathing grew heavier. His hand moved to his chest. He wasn't just anxious, he was unraveling, sweating, twitching, blinking rapidly. Every clip played on the monitor felt like another piece of armor ripped off his body, and he knew exactly what the judge was thinking. The truth he had kept hidden was now public. The image he had built was now cracked. The sentence he once accepted was now at risk. When the final clip ended, the judge closed the file in front of him with a slow, deliberate motion. That sound, that soft, final thud, echoed through the courtroom like a door slamming shut. This wasn't evidence being reviewed. This was judgment forming, and Diddy could feel it tightening around him like a noose. The courtroom felt frozen in a moment that didn't want to move forward. The lights were back on. The monitor had gone dark, but the tension left behind by those documentary clips still crawled across the walls like electricity. Judge Arun Subramanian sat silently for a long time, staring at the file in front of him. No one dared to breathe too loudly. Not the prosecutors, not Cassie's team, not the spectators, not even the marshals. And then finally the judge looked up. His eyes were cold, steady, unforgiving. The eyes of a man who had just seen enough to change everything he previously believed about this case. He cleared his throat, and the entire room leaned forward as if gravity itself had pulled them closer. "Mr. Combs," he said slowly, "what we have seen today raises questions that cannot be ignored." Diddy flinched at his own name. His fingers tightened around the edge of the table. The judge continued, his voice calm but heavy, like a verdict already forming between every syllable. He spoke about the documentary, and not like a film, but like evidence. He mentioned the victim testimonies, the hidden footage, the patterns of behavior, the inconsistencies, and finally, the leaked call. He said it all pointed towards something deeply troubling, previously concealed, and fundamentally incompatible with the original sentence. Agnifilo swallowed hard. Everyone knew where this speech was going. Everyone except the man sitting in the center of it. Diddy. The judge paused, letting the weight of his words hang in the air. Diddy looked up slowly, eyes wide like someone bracing for a blow they could feel moving through the room but couldn't see. And then it came. "In light of the evidence presented," the judge said, voice rising with authority, "this court finds the original sentence of 50 months no longer appropriate." A gasp broke through the back of the courtroom. Diddy's chest tightened. He whispered something to himself. No one could hear it, but it sounded like a plea, a last attempt at hope, a last attempt to breathe. But the judge wasn't finished. The severity of the conduct shown, combined with the newly surfaced material, requires a reassessment and a recalibration. Diddy's head dropped. His shoulders trembled. He shook his head slowly, as if he could shake the next words away before they fell. Judge Subramanian leaned forward, both hands on the desk. "Therefore," he said, each word hitting the air like a hammer, "effective immediately, the previous sentence is vacated." The room stiffened. Reporters froze. Agnifilo closed his eyes. Diddy mouthed, "No." And replaced with life imprisonment. The explosion of sound that followed was instant. Gasps, muffled screams, frantic whispers, papers dropping, chairs creaking. It was chaos wrapped in shock. The kind of moment people remember exactly where they were when it happened. Diddy didn't move. He didn't blink. He didn't breathe. He simply collapsed back into his chair, his face draining of all color, his body trembling as if life itself had slipped out from under him. Tears didn't fall. They couldn't. He was too stunned to cry, too stunned to speak, too stunned to even look at the judge. Cassie's eyes filled, but she didn't smile. Her expression wasn't celebration. It was release. A quiet, heavy release that only someone who has survived years of silence can understand. The prosecutors exchanged glances of stunned satisfaction. Even they weren't expecting life. The marshals immediately approached, hands ready, posture shifted. The judge stood, delivering one final line that sealed the moment forever. This court will not tolerate deception, manipulation, or concealed truth within its walls. The gavel slammed, and with that single strike, Sean Diddy Combs' world ended. The reckoning didn't just expose him, it sentenced him.